The race to 5G is on, and the battle for talent is getting fierce. Welcome to 5G Talent Talk with Carrie Charles, a podcast dedicated to helping you face the future workforce head on. Navigate this challenging talent landscape with innovative strategies to attract, retain, and engage people in this new world of work. Only here on 5G Talent Talk with Carrie Charles, CEO of Broadstaff Talent Solutions.
Hi, I'm Carrie Charles, and I want to welcome you to today's episode of 5G Talent Talk. I am super excited to have with me today Paul Fioravanti. Did I say that right?
Yes, you said it perfectly. Thank you.
I love that name, Fioravanti. He's the CEO and managing partner of QORVAL Partners. Paul, thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, Carrie.
So let's get right into it. I want to hear more about QORVAL Partners, your services, what you do. I mean, I'm so excited that you're here because I think so many people today need to hear this message.
Well, again, thank you for having me. And the quick story of QORVAL Partners is that the firm was begun 25 years ago in Tampa by my late partner, Jim Malone. Jim passed away last year. Unfortunately, we lost him, but we've not lost the shadow of his great leadership. And Jim probably is the only person that I'm aware of that ever was the CEO of 6 Fortune 500 companies in 6 different industries. And the amazing thing about Jim is just his humility. He was just a super guy and really helped so many people, not just with business lessons, but with life lessons. So I was thankful to begin working with Jim about 10 years ago. And we're I don't really like the phrase boutique firm, but we're a smaller management consulting and advisory firm. We've got about 35 subject matter experts that work in a range of different capabilities as interim managers, whether they be CEO, CFO, COO roles, or other subject matter expertise areas such as IT, human resources, leadership training, cybersecurity. There's a mix of business challenges that even smaller businesses today are facing. In terms of my involvement, I've been involved in about 70 situations in about 35 industries. And one of the things that you learn when you've had that kind of broad experience is that every industry thinks that it's really unique and special, but there are a lot more common denominator issues that affect businesses, even size-wise. Sometimes it's easier to fix a larger business than a smaller one. But
so I thought that was interesting. And this is one of the reasons why I really wanted to have you on the show, because you work in so many different industries. And I know that it's valuable for leaders to get insights from different industries to pull that into telecom. But I do know that you've also served a lot of clients in the telecom space. So who is your, let's say, typical telecom client?
Well, beyond telecom, let me take a step back. So most of the work that we do is in 2 verticals or 2 areas. One is manufacturing, the other is services. And in the services realm, we have probably worked on 25 or 30 trade contractors, with almost half of them being telecom or wireless or related communications contractors. And to answer your question, I think most commonly it's a contractor that hits a certain size plateau. And we see that, for example, there could be a contractor that's profitable at 1 or 2 million revenue. They scale up to 10, they start to have problems. Or they go from, say, 12 or 15 up to 30 million in revenue, they start to have issues. And I think what happens is the contractors get lost along the way. And sometimes the business and the clients and the people, even the managers that get you to a certain level, they are not the people that will get you to the next level. And the challenges that typically emerge in the telecom contracting space, I think the number one is very thin margin work and the contractors not truly knowing what their cost structure is. And there's a there's a temptation to fall into the idea of bidding a job on gross margin. For example, in fact, we have an article about it. It's called the gross margin trap. But the idea is that a project manager said, well, this job, it was a telecom job. We bid the job for 10,000, our cost is 6. Well, we made 4. But he forgot about the other half of the income statement, where below direct and indirect and materials costs, you have things like company overhead, insurance, that sort of thing. So I think the greatest thing that a contractor can do to ensure profitability is really manage the relationship between fixed costs and variable costs. And one of my sayings is always that fixed costs are the enemy of profitability. And when a contractor grows and their customer is telling them, well, you guys need to ramp up because we have all this work for you, and go out and hire people and buy trucks and all that kind of stuff, that's a very tricky spot to be in. And without good job costing, they can really find themselves going down a rabbit hole.
Yes, I agree. And that's why sometimes we will suggest to our clients to use contractors so they don't have those fixed costs. Well, at least, they're temporary. So I know you talked a little bit about the problems that you solve. Can you maybe discuss a case study or a success story or two from your telecom clients?
Sure. I think, candidly, there are many more challenging situations where a telecom contractor maybe has gotten off track with profitability. And one particular company comes to mind. And just to put it in terms of impactful numbers, we were called in at a point in time where they had actually grown significantly year over year, but their controls had gotten so bad that they were just sort of lost in the weeds. And I remember the numbers. This was in, I think it was 2016. So year over year, the company went from, say, 24 to 32 million revenue. So they did an additional 7 million, 8 million in revenue. And what we did was we isolated the additional work that they did that period, and we broke it down and looked at it as if that was like an individual P&L income statement. And what we found was that after doing almost 8 million in revenue, there was a $1,700 profit contribution. And that tells you that all that additional business really was a distraction. So the challenge the company had was they started just throwing resources at problems rather than what we like to do is, I have called the 3 M's: map, measure, and modify. So map out what's happening, measure output, production, margin, what are the KPIs of your business? If it's not measurable, it's not a KPI. And in the case of this company, their idea was, well, we're just going to get the latest software. We're going to, have a project management software. We're going to have a progress tracking software. And they had, I think they started with QuickBooks, which worked fine. Then they went with another platform, Timberline or Sage, that they really could not support. So they started adding all these technologies and software platforms, and everything, they just sort of lost sight. It's kind of like flying a plane in the dark with no lights on the instrument panel. They just had no idea where they were, where the horizon was. And that's a pretty common problem with companies as they grow. They just don't really understand. The two most important things in business are dollar sources and dollar uses. You need to know where the money's coming from, and you need to know where the money's going. And as basic as that sounds, I mean, I was a CEO of a $350 million pharma company for a year and turned that around. And this was run by pharma veterans, and they were losing money. They had no idea on 30 million a month how they would make money. So it's not always just, again, industry experience or hiring the people to check the box. It's the hard work and the grind of getting in the trenches and looking at margin, looking at data, understanding where you're making money, where you're generating losses. It's so critical.
Yeah. Yes, and you do quite a few turnarounds, right, in your work?
Yes, we do. Most of our practice is turnaround restructuring, but we focus on what I call the 3 ITs of why people hire us. It's grow it, fix it, exit. And those are typically things that are motivated by the need to make a change. It's a transformational plateau, or it's a point in time where the company has an event, right? There's usually a significant emotional or focusing event that happens. And it might be the accountant does the year-end financials and said, hey, you guys are bleeding. Or it may be that they run out of cash, which happens fairly frequently. So there's something that motivates needing to make a change, and they need to either grow or fix, or in many cases, exit. And exits can be great. They can be very profitable and very opportunistic. Sometimes they unfortunately are motivated by the need to get out because a bank or a lender is pressuring them. Maybe they violated a borrowing covenant. There's some variable that's motivating them to make a change and seek an exit.
Got it. What are some common mistakes that you see companies make or leaders make? I know there's probably a very, very long list, and not just necessarily in telecom, but in general, that you start working with a company and you say, okay, yes, I've seen this 100 times.
Well, one mistake that we don't fall into, or trap that we try not to fall into, is even if it looks like a situation that we have seen before, we can't typecast it and we can't generalize, because there are no 2 situations that are alike. So what we do is what the company should do, and that is collect objective data and look at what's really happening in the business. But I would say a common trap that businesses fall into is they think that as they're growing, that it will solve a multitude of sins. But the truth is that growth consumes cash. It costs money to grow. And I think a lot of businesses don't realize that. We have worked with, I think we're on 4 companies that have been on Shark Tank in one way, shape, or form. Either were turned down, won, or somewhere in the middle. And as they're growing, it's one thing to get an initial capital investment, or for any business to get an initial line of credit or something. But there are times where you hit a wall on growth, and it's very tempting to run out, and in this industry, in telecom, it's very tempting to run out and hire all your friends and hire everybody you know. And time and again, I've seen this play of, oh yeah, Frank is the project manager, and Joe is the engineering guy, and we're going to bring him aboard, and he's only looking for X, and he needs a new truck, and he's going to bring all this work with him, and he's got the relationship with insert name of carrier here. And that usually doesn't happen. Which leads us to the concept of the cultural challenges of the industry. And I've run several specialty contracting companies, either as a COO or a CEO, everything from, again, pharmaceuticals to manufacturing, but several companies in the construction and services space. And what's unique about telecom and wireless is it's got an industry culture that is very challenging compared to other industries. And if you talk with anybody that works in multiple verticals, telecom, communications, utility services, power plant, energy in general, renewables, each one of those verticals has a discrete and distinct culture. But wireless is certainly an interesting one, to say the least.
Yes, I agree. So I'm curious, though, could you go a little deeper there? And what does make it different?
Again, I think if you go back to the evolution of the industry, when you think about some of the early companies that were putting cell towers up in the late 80s, you think back to companies like Metro Mobile, Bell Atlantic. There were some of the early companies, even some of the tower co's like Crown and those companies had a very different income statement, different margin at the time. You could put up a cell tower. If you were a contractor, you're making a lot of money at that time. even on the engineering side, a set of drawings was maybe $8,000. And then a couple of years later, you were allowed, $1,750. So the margins got tighter, and there was upward pressure on the cost of just being in business. And in certain Northeastern states, the workers' comp insurance premiums, general liability, excess liability, and now other things they've added on, like cybersecurity, employment practices liability. So the cost of doing business has gone up. The margins have come down, and it's made the industry very challenging because with reverse auction pricing, matrix pricing, all the things going on in the industry, it makes it very difficult to make any money if you do not have control over every single penny and dollar. And again, I think your business is the future because in the industry, they've learned that flexible staffing is the key. Again, what I said earlier, fixed costs are the enemy of margin. And I've always felt that the ideal business model in the wireless contracting space or wireless communications infrastructure space is to have flexible staffing. And what companies don't do enough of is they don't, and we've seen this time and again, they do not develop relationships at a higher level in the organization. For example, if I'm running Contractor Co. and I'm at the mercy of the market manager, and God only knows, who's knocking on his door and what they're offering him. It's an interesting industry from that perspective. But our advice to clients is always elevate your relationship in the organization. And for example, if a contractor is working for Verizon and they've never presented to Verizon corporate, or if they're working for Ericsson and they don't even know where Plano, Texas is and have never been there, that's a problem. That's a ticking time bomb because they don't have that air cover in the business relationship. And you should do that in any industry. You should always elevate the level of your relationship. But beyond that, a common trap that contractors will fall in is they'll get behind paying their subs. And next thing you know, the sub is knocking on the door of the GC or knocking on the door of the tower co or the turf vendor. And once you've kind of eroded that reputation, you're on a slippery slope. And again, there's always another guy that's willing to kind of come along and take the work from you. So there isn't a lot of loyalty. It's a thin margin business. Cost controls and just management controls in these companies is typically not great. And again, just because they're big or even in some cases public, it doesn't mean they're good. It just means they're big.
Right.
And what's interesting about culture too is, we've all heard this Peter Drucker quote for years, culture eats strategy for breakfast. The one that I learned from Jim is, culture is the least, or is the behavior that you tolerate, like the worst behavior that you tolerate. I said that wrong. Culture is the worst behavior that you tolerate in an organization. And that happens at any level. So if it's an executive behavior or if it's a lower level employee behavior, and what's the worst thing that you do that's acceptable, whether it's the service you provide or it's something that happens internal to the organization, that's your common denominator. And that's your baseline for what sets the company culture and what sets the tone.
Wow, that was powerful. And I hope everyone really took notes there because it's, what did you say? Say it one more time, because this is
culture is the worst. Culture is the worst behavior that you tolerate.
That you tolerate. Okay, great. So I have a company and I've got, let's say 80% of my people are just engaged and, connected and passionate about the company. And then I've got 20%, let's say 10% that are medium and 10% that are disengaged. So that 10% is who I need to pay attention to. And I have to elevate that 10%, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And some of them may not make the trip, candidly. Some of them are not on what we call the traveling team. Some of them just won't, some of them just won't make it. Yeah. I mean, again, I think there are a lot of variables that form people and how they behave in organizations. And it's sort of like, you have this culture that you enforce in your organization and that you cultivate, and you're trying to take care of your people so that they're loyal to you, that it's a retention tool, that most of all, they're happy. It's a profitable experience for them to be there. Maybe there's some share, there's an ESOP plan, there's profit sharing or something. So there's a reason why they want to stick around, presumably. And the challenge with that now is loyalty is in short supply. There are a lot of people that, and I don't know if I'm not sure how it correlates to the pandemic. I've heard about the Great Resignation and everything else, like everybody else has, but I don't really understand it. And the question remains, where are they going? So there's definitely a churn, and there's a reason that people are not sticking.
Right.
But that's not necessarily bad, because if they are not the right people in the role, then they shouldn't be there, right? And one of the books we always recommend is Jim Collins' Good to Great. And you've heard the story about the right people in the right seats on the right bus. And that is definitely a causal, I would say an independent variable of the outcome of culture, right? So if you're bringing the right people into the organization, there's a collective learning and development that happens. And the assumption of that is that the organization should get better. They should be better at managing stakeholders. Their clients, organizational clients, are stakeholder. So if you're falling on your face constantly with Ericsson, Nokia, Black & Veatch, Verizon, AT&T, whoever it is, then there's something seriously wrong. And you have to take that feedback, and it's sometimes as simple as, again, a high level connection between the CEO of the contracting company and the highest level that they can get to within the customer relationship to say, can we meet, and can you tell me what we can do better? I was in a situation where this was a Massachusetts wireless contractor that was probably one of the worst managed companies I've ever seen. And we actually had to go to the client and ask them what we had not billed. And we found out that we missed almost $1.5 million in billing. That's pretty embarrassing when your client tells you that, by the way, I know you guys are struggling financially, but maybe you should bill the $1.5 million that we owe you.
Oh my God.
Yeah, but again, it happens all the time.
It does. Yep.
And again, I don't mean to, be critical of the industry, because every industry can get better. Every manager can get better. We can all get better at what we do. But again, it's what culture is tolerated in this idea that, well, that's the way we've always done it, or that's the way the industry works. There's always an opportunity to change it. Quick story. So in doing the pharma turnaround, we had a site in Puerto Rico that was a legacy Merck site. And the employees there were struggling because the future of the site was uncertain. It was only operating at 25 or 30% capacity. And what I saw the solution to be was, let's get more volume. We're manufacturing a product for Merck. Let's go to Merck, sit down with the senior manager and say, look, this site is not sustainable at the current volume. If you can give us a larger share of global volume, then and we'll be more efficient with the way we operate, then you still have a supplier. We're still in business. We keep all the employees. We operate, and we are profitable and sustainable. The sustainability issue is a critical one, because if a business is not operating properly, then that's a downstream risk of all the way up to the tower co or the turf vendor, because they don't want those contractors and materials vendors coming back saying, hey, I was never paid, or company goes out of business. That's too much of a risk to bear.
Yes. You mentioned about, the telecom industry and telecom companies and how challenging it is. But to me, the great ones will rise above and they'll stand out. The companies that really know how to manage and succeed in this climate that we're in today, which is very different, like you said, than it was even 2 years ago or 5 years ago. So I really feel like that they will rise to the top. And well, I'll talk about that a little bit later, but I wanted to go in a little bit deeper into the workforce challenges that you're seeing with your clients. I mean, we know there's not enough people, and there's retention issues, and, everybody wants more money, and there's just so many challenges. But are you seeing, what are you seeing when you go into a company that are, some common challenges that that leaders are going through right now? And then also, what are you recommending to them right now? What strategies?
It's a great question. It's a question that cuts across all industries, and it's a question that cuts across all size organizations. And I think if data has shown us anything, it's that people are not motivated exclusively by money, because there are many well-paid people that leave jobs for some other reason. And you have to really dig down into, what do people like about the organization? What do they not like about the organization? So retention comes in many forms and flavors. In some cases, it's some kind of a share program where they're sharing profit. Maybe it's, again, an ESOP or stock sharing, or in other cases, it's flexibility. They like the ability to work from home, or they like the ability to kind of figure out, when they can take personal time off. So there are other variables. I think healthcare is a tricky one. There are a lot of companies that when things get tight, they really start to get aggressive with how much of a share that they ask employees to pay on healthcare. So that can be a reason why retention suffers. But I think generally people want to feel, and this is going to sound like a simplification, but it's true. People want to feel like they're part of something, that they're building something, that they matter. And morale, again, is driven by many independent variables, but inclusiveness is a critical one. And I don't envy the job of a human resources manager in any size organization now, because their job has gotten so complex, and there are compliance issues that are driven by regulations and laws, but there are also what I call expectations compliance. And that is, the company down the street, or the company that my friend works for, or the company that my, significant other or neighbor or somebody works for, is offering this. Or, they're talking about things like ESG. They're talking about things like, just general corporate responsibility. So what's happened in the last, I think, 10 years is people as employees identify with values. And if there's a value system gap between how the organization that they work for performs and behaves versus what their values are, that's a problem. And honestly, sometimes there aren't any values. There are people that just want a paycheck. They want to clock out at 5:01 and go home. That's fine. There are other people that, have 12 hours of work to do in 8 hours, and they want somebody to say, well, we understand what you're doing and how hard you're working, and here's what we're going to do for you. Again, recognition is a critical one. Right now, it is certainly the most atypical time that I've lived through in my business career. And there are a lot of things that cannot be explained, but this great resignation, I think if you really peel back the data, what you will see is it's a lot of churn in younger brackets of workers. And it's not necessarily full-time employment either. So you could have a bunch of people that are jumping from, working to Target to working to Home Depot to, working to wherever, which has been the case with my sons, where they're college age, so they're working retail typically. And I don't know if, that's counted in the stats, but there's definitely a lot of movement among what I would call the $15 to $20 per hour jobs, because there are a lot of choices in the market. Not everybody can jump in a C-level job as quickly as they can in an entry-level job. But again, I think ultimately a company has to make it clear that they value employees as a group of stakeholders as much as they value other groups of stakeholders like customers, shareholders, regulators, et cetera.
I often say that we are in the human era of work where employees are at the center of everything. And I do agree with you. I think the human resource professionals are really some of the most important people in a company right now because everything is about people. And I know that I speak to so many leaders, and I was just speaking at I did a presentation last week on culture, and everyone is, a lot of leaders are saying, gosh, I don't know what to create. I'm at a loss for, how do we change our culture? What do we do? I mean, is it something that we're doing wrong right now? And how do we make it different, better for this, again, world we're living in, whether it's post-COVID or just this new world? So have you done, let's say, culture turnarounds? And if so, what were some of the steps that you took that other companies can take right now?
In several situations where I've come in as an interim executive, and by this stage of my career, titles don't mean anything to me. So, but if I go in as a whatever I am, interim general manager, interim CEO, one of the first priorities for me is to meet everybody. And with one of the big organizations I turned around had 2,700 employees. But when you break it down into site visits and you're talking to groups of employees in 40, 50, you can kind of tick them off and you get a sense of who's doing what, and you get a lay of the land organizationally. But beyond that, any CEO also needs to spend the time in front of every customer, in front of every regulator, in front of every critical stakeholder situation, vendors. So the job of management is, remember the old saying, management by walking around. That's also management by driving around, flying around. It's management by getting in somebody's face and having a conversation with them where you are caring and empathetic. And I think where most senior executives fail, in my opinion, and this was the case, I think, with a couple of larger turnarounds, the senior management was elitist. The senior management was not empathetic. They're very low on EQ. And they just don't like people and care about people. That's like a horrible place to be in. And I don't understand why somebody doesn't understand that as a senior executive, you have to be, like Jim always used to say, POMC, plan, organize, motivate, control. And the motivation piece is critical to get people to provide the desired outcome, right? You need them to do their jobs. One of the best things that a senior executive can do or a company can do is sit and talk. And I realize that's been a challenge over the last 2 years, but having a very simple town hall meeting where you can have a conversation with among each other and feel compelled to discuss things in the open without fear of reprisal or retribution. I think it's important to have those candid conversations. And I will be the first one to do that in my role, to say, what can we do better? What aren't we doing well? And employees will tell you, they do not hold back. They will tell you, and it might be as simple as, details matter, right? Well, we used to have bottled water delivered to the cafeteria and somebody forgot about that and we haven't had bottled water. Okay, well, how does that happen? If we're forgetting bottled water, what else are we forgetting?
Right.
So details matter. And if you're doing your job right as a senior executive, then you're doing a lot more listening than you are talking.
Absolutely brilliant. It's a new time. I mean, there's been a shift, and I call it, even a culture revolution. I mean, it's shifted, and we've never been here before. I don't think, any of us as leaders, like you said, has ever been here before. And I think it's more important now than ever to have trusted advisors. Now, I have a trusted advisor. I have an advisory firm that is helping us grow and scale at Broadstaff. And in fact, I've got a few, and then I've got coaches, and I've got other people that I lean on. And it's invaluable because, like I said, when we are trying to navigate something that we've never navigated before, we need outside perspective. And we need information as leaders to be able to say, okay, what's this person doing over here? And what's this person doing? And, we need that. And I know that that's something that you provide. Who is let's say, your ideal client at QORVAL?
I always joke and say our ideal client is one that is going to listen to us, because there are a lot of people that want advisors, but they don't want the advice. And it's very easy to take advice, but it's very difficult to change. And one of our long-term clients, been with us for over 4 years now, is one that I think fits that description. It's I don't have a problem telling you the name of the company. It's Naples Soap Company. It's a very fast growing retailer. They have a great website. They do a great direct to consumer business. They're on Amazon. By the end of the year, they'll probably have 20 stores in Florida. And we've been working with them, as I mentioned, since 18. And in that time, the business has doubled. Profitability has gone up by a multiple of 8. I'm not talking out of school, because they are a publicly held company, and we assisted them along with a securities attorney and another capital advisory group to bring them through the reverse merger process and turn them into a public company. But I think Deanna Wallen, who's the CEO of Naples Soap Company, is one of the best CEOs that I've worked with. Irrespective of company size. And I tell her all the time, she could run a $400, $500, $600 million business very easily, because she doesn't have a problem admitting what she doesn't know. And she's always been fine with hiring advisors and subject matter experts as needed or on retainer to help her shape the business, because every day things change. And you can get into some very uncomfortable corners if you don't have experience in a certain situation. What we're able to bring, and what people that do what we do, there are larger firms than us, of course, but I think the advantage of having a different set of eyes externally is the objectivity, what we call objective perspective. It helps you see things that you don't see, that you don't understand.
Yes.
And that's, I tip my hat to you, Carrie, for, hiring advisors. And I mean, the growth of your company has been amazing.
Thank you.
And again, but I would say that is a shadow of the leader with you, because you're okay saying, hey, I need help, or I need a different set of eyes. And that's very wise. A lot of companies can find themselves in difficult circumstances just because they don't do that, or they're not willing to, spend the money, right? And Jim Jim Malone, my partner at one point, was the CEO of a company called Facet Automotive, which became Purolator. And they had the Fram oil filter brand. And there was a famous ad campaign in the 70s and 80s for Fram. And basically they were interviewing the mechanic in the shop. And he says, you can pay me now or you can pay me later. And it's the idea that, a person wouldn't spend $50 for the oil change, but they'll spend $5,000 to put a new engine in the car. Yep. And its maintenance is always far less expensive than repair. And that comes in different forms. So it's easier to maintain and grow your business than it is to have a catastrophic meltdown that you need to, have a crisis situation in.
That is so true. I always say that there's things that we know, and there's things that we don't know, and there's things that we don't know that we don't know. And I think as leaders, that's where we really go wrong, because there's things we don't know that we don't know, and we're missing it. And it actually could be hurting our businesses. So, Paul, I mean, I could talk to you all day. This is just so engaging. And I love this conversation. I really, really appreciate you coming on the show. Tell me what's your website? Where can you be reached?
Sure. Happy to help. Our website is QORVAL. There's no U in there. Everybody always wants to put a U in there. It's QORVAL.com. Everyone asks what the name means. Jim came up with it, and it means core values, even though there's a Q on there. Wow. And the core values of our company have always been profit, growth, integrity, and fun. And that was really what Jim was all about. In fact, later this year, his book is coming out, and it's called P plus F plus G. Anyway, it's security is the the quotient on the formula, because Jim's idea was if you had all these things happening in an organization or within you as a manager, you had security. Mm-hmm. And companies need to be profitable. They need to grow. The employees and the stakeholders have to be having fun, and it has to be done on a foundation of integrity.
Mm. You know, Jim sounds like a wonderful man, and I'm sure he's going to be listening to this podcast.
He was an amazing
and so proud. That's wonderful. No, Paul, this has been great. Thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing so much and being transparent and giving and being generous. And I hope that we can have a follow-up maybe in 12 months from now and see where we are in the world.
Thank you so much, Carrie. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here, and hopefully something that I've shared has been helpful to your audience. And I'm always happy to help people, even if it's not an engagement situation for us. We have a lot of conversations to help people through challenging situations. So I'm happy to do that.
Yes, you do. And you've helped me as well. So thank you, Paul. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Carrie.
Thank you for listening to another informative episode of 5G Talent Talk, brought to you by RCR Wireless News, Telecom Careers, and Broadstaff Talent Solutions. As we advance into the future, we promise to bring you the resources you need to navigate this ever-changing landscape of 5G to help you attract, retain, and engage people in this new world of work. To access the show notes or leave a review, visit broadstaffglobal.com. Until next time.